Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video and the final red zone video around LR Beast Gohan. And this is going to be the conclusion of my final thoughts of what I really think of him as a unit as a whole. So disappointment aside, expectations aside, this is my honest opinion of how good or bad I think LR Beast Gohan is. But since it's been a while since he's been released now with Orange Piccolo, let me know down in the comments what your final verdict on LR Beast Gohan actually is. Do you like him? Do you not? Are you still disappointed? Do you think he's actually a solid unit but not quite up to par? I said expectations aside, what is your honest opinion on LR Beast Gohan if you do have him and if you've seen content on him now that he's been out for a while? Don't forget, drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, all the support is very much appreciated. And let's give my final thoughts. So, one of the major advantages about going into the Cooler Core Red Zone event is LR Beast Gohan has type advantage against Cooler Army. The main function of this phase is literally just survive. And your main goal is to maintain as much HP as possible going into Cooler Core. So the fact we're stuck here for 3 turns, and if we can get him on rotation, which we did, he was on the second one, so he's going to have one appearance here to basically build up as much, as much as he possibly can, which with mine being at 55%, is highly likely to just be twice out of the full 5 times. If we're lucky, we could potentially get the 5 additional off and get an extra super off and build up 3 times. If he appears on the first rotation, you could have him appear twice, which means you could pretty much have him built up if you're lucky enough to also have dupes by the time you go into Cooler Army, or sorry, Cooler Core, which is exactly what you'd want. You want him fully built up, ready to go by the time you get into Cooler Core, because that's when the big damage starts coming out. That's where you need Gohan to be doing big damage himself. Unfortunately, I don't have dupes, and again, he was on my second rotation. So that type advantage, very helpful at him not taking as much damage as other units. Also, this is the first 3 turns. We have his entrance animation active. He's got the extra attack and defense plus 100%. He's got the extra defense more importantly. And he has the 3-turn guard. So, considering your main goal here is to survive and also maintain as much HP before you go into the Cooler Core phase as possible, he's got that in the back. The type advantage, the guard, the extra defense, he's good, as you saw there, prior to even super attacking, before he starts building up his passive, before he got any extra attacking defense, before he has a defensive raise on super. He's tanking double digits on basics, which is kind of what you expect, but it's good. It's still good. It helps you, as I said, survive and maintain as much HP as possible. So that's that. As I said, because he was on the second rotation, we could only get 2 build-ups because, luckily enough, we managed to get as much ki as possible to get that additional super. Again, we would have to get very, very lucky to get the 5 additional actually pop off for us. But it's obviously a possibility. But mine is at 55%, so this is my opinion on him at 55%. So we could add him stacked up 3 times in his passive by the time we went into the Cooler Core phase. We only had him stacked up twice. And then in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I'm not going to lie, it's a little bit risky, like just a little bit, just because I know how much damage Cooler Core can do, not just on super, but on basics, because his basics hit incredibly hard. And considering Gohan's defense it's solid at best. Considering he loses the guard, his defense is like 500-600k, which is kind of mad to say that's solid at best. Like back in the day, that would have been insane amounts of defense. You know, Dokkan changes. But 500-600k defense, even, if he's popping off and getting all the additional supers, is just not enough to be able to handle the hardest hitting bosses in Dokkan. Don't get me wrong, he can handle the majority of Broly's basics. He can handle probably all of Omega's basics, if I remember rightly. He could probably handle Omega's supers. Maybe not the strength phase, because he has type of survival and won't have guard by then. He could handle a couple of Broly supers. He could obviously handle Cooler Army supers because he has type advantage and guard at this point. But Cooler Core and like Broly's final phase, no. He just doesn't have enough defense to be able to compete with the hardest bosses in the game. Is he a bad unit though? No. I said expectations aside, what we wanted aside, he's still a very solid unit. He's still a good unit. Obviously, is he as good as we wanted him to be? No, because we wanted him to be like top 2 in the game or the best unit in the game because of how hype we was waiting for him. But he's still a solid unit. However, if I had to rank him in a top 10, I don't know about a specific ranking. However, he's definitely like 5 or below. He's actually not even 5 below. He's definitely below the midpoint. He's definitely below 5. So over the next few months, he's easily going to fade out the top 10 in the future very quickly. And there's one of the key issues with him there, which is, of course, I've mentioned it before, and it's one of his most glaring issues, which obviously relates back to the fact he doesn't get enough ki. In some instances, if orb placement is not kind to you in the slightest, you are going to struggle to get this man to an 18 ki, which is very unfortunate because you want to maximize the damage, which is really Gohan's strong point. Like, once he's fully built up, even at 55%, I've said this so many times now, he shreds enemy health bars. He does so much damage, and if you can get in the 24 ki, which again can be a big struggle if orb placement isn't in your favor and you can't get him enough ki spheres, especially when you have to worry about other units on the team as well. Like, for example, we have the gods. We want to get them as many rainbow ki spheres because we want them to dodge. We also want them to get the double super. We also want other units on the rotation to super. Not only that as well, God Goku at this point, get him enough ki spheres as possible, rainbow ki spheres, to get extra attack and defense so he can defend a little bit better because he does take damage against Cooler Core. That's where the problems start to lie. He just doesn't have enough ki links. Saiyan lineage would have been huge for him. And then he doesn't get enough ki in his passive. Yes, the extra ki +1 is nice per ki sphere obtained, but he just needs more ki. I haven't found it to be too much of a problem, but when it is a problem, it's a glaring problem, especially when you're still trying to build Gohan's passive up and you want to get that 20 ki or more, so you make sure or give yourself more of a chance to build him up quicker to get the additional super, especially if yours is 55% like mine, where you have hardly any chance to get an additional super up to build him up even quicker. Then getting those and relying on RNG to give you those good orb placements, I said at some points can really cost you. Can really cost you, because in an event like this, in a red zone stage like this, where Cooler Core does so much damage on basics and especially on supers, you want Beast Gohan to be built up as quick as possible, ideally as soon as you go in against Cooler Core, or at least like one turn into Cooler Core, which, because he appeared on turn 2, because I don't have dupes to get an extra additional off more often, you know, we have to rely on the 5 additional in the dupe system, which hardly ever pops unless you're really lucky. Then we have to rely on orb placement always being generous enough to us so we can get the 20 ki or more to get that additional super to build him up quicker. So that can cost him here and there, and that was one of those scenarios. But what you'll notice is, and Sealing was quite annoying, what you'll notice is every time Gohan appears against Cooler Core, I pop a Whis. If I didn't pop the Whis the first time he appeared against Cooler Core, we probably would have been dead. We would have been dead. Cooler Core doesn't do Ki Blast based supers, so, you know, he can't nullify, so that's not even an option here. Whereas against Broly, as you saw, I think the friend one did, he performed his nullify, which 600k defense with a 50% chance to nullify is pretty decent. It's not the best, but it's decent. But because it's specifically Ki Blast based supers, he can't do that everywhere, which means solely relying on 600k defense just at this point in Dokkan just isn't enough, and it isn't up to par. Yes, he can handle the majority of basics, but so can a lot of the best units in the game. So can a lot of units in the game, actually. But because Cooler Core doesn't have a Ki Blast based super, that nullify, it just isn't an option. It isn't a utility we have. So it's just purely reliant on his defense, which, as I said, against Cooler Core just isn't enough. If we had dupes in him and, you know, we kept getting good consistent ki placement and we could, you know, super attack 2-3 times minimum in a turn, yeah, sure, it probably would be enough to handle his basics without a Whis active, 100%. But at 55%, we don't have that luxury. So once he's built up, as I said, in terms of the amount of damage Gohan is doing, it's still very good, especially if you can get the 24 ki, so his attacks become effective against all types. Like, he is really shredding enemy health bars. He's doing amazing damage, and that is his main his main strong point. Amazing damage output, even at 55%. He has solid defense, but it's just not enough to compete with the hardest bosses in the game. Unfortunately, it's just not up to par. It's not enough. And then I guess the only other thing that's kind of in his favor, which I absolutely love, and is also a big part of Dokkan, which I think a lot of people will agree, is his animations are some of the best in the game. They're honestly some of the best in the entire game. But in terms of his actual kit, as I said, the amount of damage he's doing, insane. His active also is very useful at some points, especially because he has the disable enemy action, which can honestly save runs here and there. Yes, it's RNG based if you get rid of a super, but it can generally save runs and avoiding extra damage. And obviously once he's fully built up, if you also have him linked well, which we don't have him with Tech Ultimate Gohan, so we are missing a few links here. It's not going to do the most damage, but it can still do a big chunk of damage as well, especially have dupes and if you hit a crit. But more importantly, as I said, the disable is the most important part, because it can generally save runs, you know, depending on what action you disable, especially if it's a super attack. But in conclusion, LR Beast Gohan is a good unit. He's a very solid unit. Defense just isn't enough. Like, solid defense just doesn't really cut it nowadays. Damage output's fantastic, even at 55%. But as I said, in terms of him being within the top 10, he's quite low within the top 10, and he will easily fade out very quickly, which is a huge shame. But he's still a solid unit, and that is my final conclusion. But let me know what you think down in the comments. I'll see you in the next video, guys, and peace!